The Untold Story of J.K. Rowling. J.K. Rowling's story will break you and then inspire you. Joanne Rowling, known to the world as J.K. Rowling, was born on July 31, 1965, in Yate, Gloucestershire, a small, quiet town in the southwest of England. The town was not known for anything grand, but it was a peaceful and humble place, just like the life Joanne would grow up to lead. Joanne's family was not wealthy, but they were content. Her father, Peter, worked in a local factory, while her mother, Anne, worked as a science technician at a local school. The Rowling family did not have much, but they had love, and that was more than enough. As a child, Joanne was already deeply captivated by books. There was something about the written word that filled her with a sense of wonder and possibility. From an early age, she demonstrated an insatiable hunger for stories. Every day, she would bury her nose in books, getting lost in fairy tales, adventures, and faraway lands. Her early childhood was spent in the company of characters who seemed real to her, like the animals and fantastical creatures in the stories she adored. It was this love for literature that would eventually shape her into the writer the world would come to know. Joanne's mother, Anne, was also a lover of literature, and it was from her that Joanne inherited her deep passion for books, and would often take her to the local library, which became a second home for the young Joanne. The shelves were stocked with books of all genres, from classic novels to more modern works of fiction. Joanne would spend hours in the library, picking up whatever caught her attention, reading with a sense of wonder that only a child could truly experience. She didn't just read, she devoured stories, and through them, she began to craft her own. By the time Joanne was 6, she had started writing her own stories. They were simple but imaginative, often involving animals that talked and magical places where the ordinary became extraordinary. Her first stories were inspired by the fairy tales she had read and loved. Her love for the written word was clear even at that young age, and her writing skills blossomed quickly. At school, her teachers were impressed with her ability to create vivid and engaging stories. They encouraged her to keep writing, but, like most shy children, Joanne kept her aspirations private. She was often quiet, introverted, and unsure of herself, especially when she was around her peers. Despite her shyness, Joanne's academic abilities were undeniable. At St. Michael's Primary School, she was recognized for her intelligence and was encouraged by her teachers to pursue her passions. Her strong writing skills stood out, and she often received praise for her creative essays and imaginative storylines. However, despite excelling academically, Joanne did not always fit in with the other students. She often felt like an outsider, someone who didn't quite belong. These feelings of isolation would later become a recurring theme in her writing, particularly in her character development. During her teenage years, Joanne's passion for literature only deepened. She became particularly fascinated by the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, whose Lord of the Rings trilogy had a profound impact on her. Tolkien's epic tales of magic, heroism, and fantasy opened new doors in Joanne's imagination. His rich world-building and complex characters inspired her to create stories with similar depth and intricacy. By the time she reached high school, Joanne was already dreaming of becoming a writer, although the path to getting there seemed uncertain. Joanne's parents, though supportive, were practical people. They encouraged her to pursue a career that would offer financial security. With this in mind, Joanne enrolled at the University of Exeter to study French, thinking it would provide a solid foundation for her future. During her university years, she also developed an interest in the European Renaissance, which exposed her to a variety of literary works that broadened her intellectual horizons. She was not just studying French language and literature, she was also absorbing ideas from other fields, learning about history, philosophy, and the complex interplay of culture and society. All the while, her passion for writing never waned. After graduation, Joanne moved to London to begin her professional life. She worked in a variety of jobs, including as a researcher for Amnesty International and as a secretary. While these jobs provided her with some financial stability, Joanne felt unfulfilled. Her heart was still with writing. She worked long hours, yet she always found time to write, often using her spare moments to jot down ideas in notebooks. The dream of becoming a published author still burned brightly in her heart, though it seemed distant and unreachable. She faced the daily struggle of balancing her creative aspirations with a practical need to pay the bills and survive in an expensive city. Despite the challenges, Joanne continued to write, and it was during a train ride from Manchester to London that the idea that would change her life forever came to her. She was sitting on the train when the image of a boy with glasses and a lightning bolt scar on his forehead appeared in her mind. This boy, she realized, was a wizard, destined for greatness. This was the birth of Harry Potter. Joanne had no pen or paper with her, but the idea struck her like lightning, and she spent the rest of the journey thinking about it, planning it in her mind. As soon as she arrived home, she began to write down her ideas for the story. She knew this was the story she had been waiting to tell. However, even though she was filled with excitement, Joanne had no idea how to take the next step. She faced the daunting task of turning the spark of inspiration into a full-fledged novel. Little did she know that her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. Her journey was only beginning, and though she had already endured hardship, loneliness, and uncertainty, Joanne had the most important thing she needed to succeed: her dream. It was this dream that would propel her forward through the difficult and often painful journey that lay ahead. The road to becoming a writer would not be easy, but for Joanne Rowling, it was a road worth traveling. She knew that one day, her stories would be shared with the world, and her name would be remembered for generations to come. After the train ride that gave birth to the idea of Harry Potter, Joanne's life took an unexpected turn. The excitement of the idea was strong, but the reality of her circumstances was much harder to face. She had to make decisions that would shape her future. Joanne moved to Portugal, where she took up a job teaching English. Though it wasn't her dream job, it provided the financial stability she needed at the time. She had to be practical, as she was now an adult trying to make a living. Teaching English in Portugal wasn't easy. The job required long hours, and it wasn't always fulfilling. But it was a job, and that was something Joanne needed desperately. She needed money to survive, especially after moving to a new country. The world of magic and wizards seemed far away, and the reality of living abroad in a foreign country made it even harder to focus on her writing. Still, Joanne found ways to write in the quiet hours of the night, when the world was asleep and the distractions of daily life faded. It was during her time in Portugal that Joanne met a man. He was kind, and for a while, they shared a life together. Their relationship seemed to bring some happiness into Joanne's life, and they soon got married. Not long after, their daughter, Jessica, was born. For a brief period, life felt stable, even happy. Joanne was living her dream of having a family, and for a while, the struggles of the past seemed far behind her. However, as with many relationships, things began to change. The marriage, which had once been full of promise, started to unravel. There were arguments, misunderstandings, and a deep sense of unhappiness. The stresses of daily life in a foreign country, coupled with the pressure of being a mother and a wife, took their toll. Eventually, Joanne made the difficult decision to separate from her husband. She left Portugal and returned to England, this time with her daughter in tow. Returning to England was not the relief Joanne had hoped for. She found herself in an even darker place than before. She had no job, no money, and no home. With a small child to care for, Joanne struggled to make ends meet. She was alone, overwhelmed, and unsure of how to move forward. She moved in with her sister, who opened her home to Joanne and her baby. Though this offer of shelter was a blessing, it also reminded Joanne of how far she had fallen. She had once had dreams of becoming a successful writer, but now she found herself struggling to survive. As Joanne settled into this new phase of her life, the weight of depression began to settle on her. She felt as though the world was closing in on her. The loneliness was suffocating. The sadness seemed to never end, and the future felt bleak. There were days when she couldn't find the strength to get out of bed, let alone write. The life she had imagined for herself seemed more distant than ever. She was scared. She was sad. She was stuck. In the midst of this darkness, Joanne still held on to one thing, her dream of becoming a writer. It was the one part of her life that hadn't been taken away. Every day, when her daughter Jessica slept, Joanne would sit in small cafes with her notebook, writing as much as she could. She didn't have a computer. All she had were scraps of paper and a pen. It was a humble setup, but it was enough. She wrote even when she didn't feel like it. She wrote when it was hard. She wrote when the world felt too heavy. The first Harry Potter book, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, began to take shape in these dark days. The story of Harry, a boy who didn't know he was a wizard, resonated with Joanne. She too felt like an outsider, someone who didn't quite belong. Writing became her escape, her way of processing the struggles she was going through. Each time she put words on paper, she felt a small spark of hope that things could get better. However, writing was not enough to solve her problems. Joanne's financial situation remained dire. She was living off benefits and relying on the kindness of her sister. Her life was far from glamorous, and there were many nights when she went to bed hungry, with only the warmth of her daughter's love to keep her going. The days were long, and the nights were even longer. Joanne didn't know how she was going to get through it all, but she kept writing. Writing was her lifeline, and she clung to it with everything she had. Depression was a constant companion during this time. There were moments when Joanne thought about giving up, when the idea of continuing the story seemed impossible. She felt as though the universe had conspired against her. She had already faced so much pain, and now, even her writing seemed like a futile attempt at something that would never happen. But she refused to give in. Something inside her told her that her story, her words, had value. Even when the world told her no, she believed in her work. Joanne's persistence paid off when she finished writing the first book. She felt a great sense of pride, but there was also a deep fear. She had no idea how to get the book published. She knew nothing about the publishing world. She had no connections, no agent, and no idea of what the next step should be. She had written the book, but now, it felt like an impossible task to find someone who would believe in it the way she did. The fear of rejection weighed heavily on her. What if no one wanted to publish the book? What if no one cared about Harry and his magical world? These questions haunted Joanne as she began the arduous task of sending out her manuscript to publishers. She would later recall the feeling of each rejection letter arriving in the mail, each one a blow to her already fragile confidence. But she didn't give up. She couldn't. Her dream was bigger than the fear. Despite the constant rejections, Joanne continued to write. She knew that her story was special, and she refused to let it die. Every rejection hurt, but it also fueled her determination. She knew that if she could just find the right publisher, her life would change. She clung to this hope like a lifeline. Every no brought her one step closer to a yes. Her personal struggles, her depression, her poverty, her sense of failure, were all woven into the story of Harry Potter. Harry's journey was a reflection of Joanne's own struggles. He was an orphan who didn't know who he truly was, just like Joanne had once felt. Joanne understood Harry's pain because she had lived it herself. She had overcome the darkness in her own life, and she believed that Harry could do the same. As she continued to work on the book, Joanne began to find small moments of joy again. Her writing gave her purpose. It reminded her that she was capable of more than just surviving. She was creating something beautiful, something meaningful. And that was enough to keep going. After finishing her first draft of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Joanne Rowling felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. She had spent years creating this magical world, pouring all her heart into every word. Harry, Ron, Hermione, they were more than just characters. They were a part of her, her escape, her strength. But even with a completed story, the road ahead was still uncertain. She did not have a printer at home. She typed out the entire manuscript on an old typewriter, sometimes copying the full thing again just to make another copy. It took time. It took effort. It took all the patience she had. And even though she was tired, she did it, page by page, night by night. Every letter was a piece of her struggle and her soul. With her handwritten and typed copies ready, she carefully packed the manuscript and sent it to different publishers. She didn't have any connections or anyone to guide her. She only had her dream. She mailed her story and waited. Every day, she checked the mail with hope. And slowly, the rejections began to come in. The first letter said no. Then the second. Then the third. The pattern continued. Each rejection letter was short, cold, and painful. Some publishers said that children's books were not in demand. Others said the story was too long. A few never replied at all. Joanne felt crushed. She had already been through so much: poverty, loneliness, depression, and now her dream was being rejected too. Each rejection felt like a door closing. But Joanne did not stop. She believed in her story. She believed that somewhere out there, someone would see what she saw, a world full of magic, courage, and love. She kept sending her manuscript to more publishers, even when her heart was heavy with doubt. During this time, she joined writing groups and visited libraries to learn more about publishing. She read books about famous authors who had once been rejected. That gave her strength. She reminded herself that even the greatest writers had to face no before they got their yes. She held on to that thought every time she received another rejection letter. Still, life was hard. She was surviving on government aid. She couldn't afford a new coat or a warm meal. Her daughter was growing up fast, and Joanne felt guilty for not giving her a better life. But Jessica was always smiling, always loving. Her laughter became Joanne's strength. Every time she felt like giving up, she looked at her daughter and remembered why she had started this journey in the first place. Then came the 12th rejection. Joanne felt broken. She began to ask herself hard questions. Was she wasting her time? Was her story not good enough? Was it all just a dream that would never come true? She cried. But after the tears, she picked up the manuscript again. She told herself, just one more. One more try. She sent the manuscript to a small publishing house called Bloomsbury. She had no expectations left. She was used to rejection now. She mailed it and told herself not to hope too much. But something was different this time. Weeks passed. Then one day, the phone rang. It was an editor from Bloomsbury. They said something that made Joanne freeze. They liked the story. But what truly changed everything was that the chairman of Bloomsbury had given the first chapter to his 8-year-old daughter to read. She loved it. She finished it and asked for more. That little girl's excitement was the spark Joanne had been waiting for. The editor said, "We want to publish your book." Joanne could not believe it. Her heart raced. Her hands shook. She kept asking, "Are you sure?" And yes, they were sure. But there was a small warning. They told her that children's books often don't sell well. They advised her to get a day job. Still, they would publish the book. For Joanne, that was enough. It was a start. They asked her to choose a pen name. The publishers thought a book written by a woman might not appeal to young boys. So, Joanne used her initials, J.K. Rowling. The K came from her grandmother's name, Kathleen. She didn't have a middle name, but she made one up for the book. The book was released in 1997. It had a small print run. Only 500 copies were printed in the first edition. 300 of them went to libraries. There were no big posters. No big promotions. Just a simple book with a boy on the cover and a lightning bolt scar. J.K. Rowling was now a published author. When she held the book for the first time, she cried. Not because it was perfect. Not because she knew it would become famous. But because after years of rejection, someone had finally said yes. After all the pain, all the darkness, she had finally made it to the light. The story of Harry Potter was no longer just hers. It was ready to be shared with the world. And though she had no idea what was coming next, one thing was certain: she had taken the hardest step. She had never given up. When Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone was released in 1997, J.K. Rowling had no idea how much her life was about to change. At first, only a few people noticed the book. It was a quiet beginning, no bright lights, no big celebrations, just a simple story slowly making its way into the world. But something magical happened. The children who read the book loved it. They talked about it at school. They told their friends. Parents noticed their children reading with joy, staying up late to finish chapters, asking questions about the wizarding world. Word spread, not through big advertisements, but through the hearts of readers. Soon, more bookstores began to ask for copies. Teachers recommended it in class. Libraries had waiting lists for it. A simple story, written in dark cafes and cold rooms, started reaching more and more people. Then came the awards. J.K. Rowling's book won several children's book prizes. Critics called it brilliant, magical, and unforgettable. What surprised everyone was that it was not just children who loved it, adults were reading it too. The story had something for everyone: friendship, bravery, love, loss, and the fight between good and evil. By the end of the year, more copies were printed. Then more again. The small first edition of 500 books became 50,000. Then 500,000. In 1998, the book was released in the United States under a new title, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. An American publisher named Scholastic paid a high amount, over $100,000, for the rights to publish it in the U.S. J.K. Rowling could hardly believe it. This was the moment she realized she could now support her daughter, pay her bills, and live without fear. She didn't have to borrow money anymore. She didn't have to skip meals or stay cold at night. Her dream was not just alive, it was growing. The second book, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, came out in 1998. The third, The Prisoner of Azkaban, followed in 1999. With each book, her readers waited eagerly. Bookstores started opening at midnight just to sell the new books as soon as they were released. Children dressed up as wizards, holding wands and wearing glasses, counting the days until the next adventure. Harry Potter was no longer just a book. It was a movement. Publishers translated the series into more than 70 languages. The books were sold in nearly every country in the world. Millions of copies were printed. By the time the seventh and final book was released in 2007, more than 500 million copies of the series had been sold. That made it one of the best-selling book series in history. And then came the movies. In 1999, Warner Brothers bought the film rights to the Harry Potter series. The first film was released in 2001. It became a worldwide hit. Children and adults filled theaters. They cried, they laughed, they cheered. Seeing the world of Hogwarts come alive on screen was a dream come true for millions. As each movie came out, the Harry Potter world grew bigger. It became more than just a book or a film. It became a part of people's lives. Fans created clubs. They wrote letters to J.K. Rowling, thanking her for changing their lives. Some said her stories helped them through hard times. Others said they learned about love, courage, and loyalty through her words. And what about Joanne? Her life had changed completely. She was no longer the single mother living on welfare. She now owned a beautiful home. She could travel anywhere in the world. She became one of the richest authors in history. But more than money, she earned something greater: respect, love, and admiration. Yet, through all the fame and success, J.K. Rowling stayed humble. She never forgot where she came from. She spoke often about her struggles, her depression, her rejections. She reminded people that failure was not the end. In fact, she said, it is impossible to live without failing at something, unless you live so cautiously that you might as well not have lived at all. Even as she stood on stages receiving awards, she carried her past in her heart. She used her voice and wealth to support charities, especially those that help poor families, single mothers, and children in need. She also built a charity called Lumos, which works to help children in orphanages find safe, loving homes. She knew what it meant to feel alone. She wanted no child to feel like they didn't matter. Joanne also continued to write, explore new stories, and inspire others. But she always said that Harry Potter would always be close to her heart, because it came from a time when she had nothing but her words and her will to survive. J.K. Rowling's story is not just about magic, books, or fame. It is about life. Real life. With pain, fear, and struggle. But also with hope, strength, and victory. She often says she was the biggest failure she knew. She had no job, no money, no husband, and no support. She was lost, broken, and full of self-doubt. At one point, she thought she had nothing left. But she had one thing left, a dream. She held on to it tightly. She protected it when no one else believed in it. She wrote when she was tired. She dreamed when she was afraid. She kept going, even when the world told her to stop. And slowly, everything changed. Her story teaches us many things, but here are the most important lessons from her life. 1. Rock bottom can be the foundation for greatness. J.K. Rowling once said, "Rock bottom became the solid foundation on which I rebuilt my life." When everything falls apart, you get a chance to rebuild. Stronger, wiser, braver. Failure is not the end, it's a beginning. It clears the noise and shows you what truly matters. 2. Believe in your dreams, even when no one else does. When everyone rejected her book, she still believed in it. When people laughed at the idea of a wizard boy, she kept writing. When she had no money, she still bought coffee and used it as rent for her writing space. She believed in her story. And that belief changed her life, and the lives of millions. 3. Do not be afraid of rejection. J.K. Rowling faced 12 rejections before one publisher said yes. She never gave up. She later said, "Some failure in life is inevitable. It is impossible to live without failing at something." Every no brought her closer to her yes. Rejection does not define you. Your response to it does. 4. Use pain to create beauty. Her pain became her power. Her sadness became her strength. The idea of Dementors in the Harry Potter series, dark creatures that suck out happiness, came from her experience with depression. She did not hide her pain. She turned it into art. 5. Kindness is a greater power than magic. Even though she became rich and famous, J.K. Rowling remained kind. She gave away millions to help others. She spoke for the poor, the sick, the voiceless. She used her success not just to shine, but to light the way for others. 6. Courage is not the absence of fear, but acting despite it. She was scared, lost, and unsure, but she still kept writing. She still kept trying. That is real courage. She proved that bravery is not always about fighting dragons, it's about showing up even when you feel small and afraid. 7. It's never too late to start again. She was 32 when her first book was published. She was jobless, a single mother. But she started anyway. Her message is clear: your beginning can happen today. Right now. At any age. In any situation. J.K. Rowling is now more than an author. She is a symbol. A symbol of hope for single mothers. A light for those suffering from depression. A hero for struggling writers. An inspiration for dreamers, fighters, and believers. She showed the world that your current situation does not decide your future. Your mindset does. Your effort does. Your refusal to give up does. She once said, "We do not need magic to change the world. We carry all the power we need inside ourselves already." And she was right. Maybe you are struggling right now. Maybe you feel like giving up. Maybe your dreams feel too big or too far away. But remember this. J.K. Rowling sat in a cafe with nothing but a pen, a child, and a dream. And from that, she created a world that changed her life and ours. So never stop believing. Never stop dreaming. And never stop writing your own story. Because just like her, you are the author of your life. And your story is not over yet.